The Danger of New Neighbours. A sweet Regency romance vignette, written by Leenie Brown and narrated by Christopher, a cloned voice made available by the voice actor through the Elevenlabs library. Author's note: this vignette came to be after I spent some time playing around with a generative AI program. I just wanted to see what it could do, so I asked it to give me a 500-word story about a gentleman who falls in love with his neighbour. The result was not great, but it did help get my creativity going. The above vignette contains the following AI-generated things: the surname of the hero, the idea that he loves the freedom he has as a single man, the idea that he falls in love with a lively lady who has a sister, and the fact that his mother loves to host parties and try to match him up. That's it. The rest of the story is all LI. Leenie Intelligence. Gregory Stannard tapped his hat into place and retrieved his walking stick from the corner in which it lived on the left of the entry to his townhouse. "Have a good day, sir," his butler said as he opened the door. "To you as well, my good fellow." This was the same exchange that the two had every day as Gregory left for his morning exercise, which would often find him wandering off, to partake in an array of things which were utterly unplanned and completely to his liking. His was a life of freedom, blessed freedom, to do or not do as he saw fit. He inhaled deeply of the freshness of the day, which was laden with the fragrance of rain that had fallen, and then released the breath in a great sigh of contentment. His life was just as it should be, with nary a care or restriction upon him, save for a mother who required his attention on a limited basis. She was good about giving him van der wide berth in most things. She kept to her schedule and he to his, with only an occasional overlap in them when she chose to host a dinner party to present a possible future daughter-in-law to him. That was the only fly in the ointment of an otherwise perfect life. He swung his walking stick in a circle and skipped down the steps to the walkway. It was not the most refined way to descend a set of steps, but that was just it. To him, it did not matter if it was or not, for he was in charge of his life at this moment, and skipping down 3 steps suited his mood quite well. Therefore, he dared not feel even a twinge of regret for having been so carefree and undignified. 2 doors down, a trunk was being lifted from the back of a carriage by a couple of footmen. "Do be careful with that, James." A lady dressed in a pink pelisse stood at the foot of the steps to the townhouse, as if she were a general overseeing a military campaign. Gregory shook his head. That pink coat did nothing to disguise the fact that whoever she was not a twig to be easily bent to anyone's will. He tipped his hat in greeting as he approached and prepared to pass between her and James, and the other fellow who was helping him. She held up her hand. "If you would just wait a moment, sir, this trunk is needed directly." Gregory scowled. It was not as if he was a slow walker. He could easily slip between her and James without impeding the progress of the removal of that trunk into the house. She smiled at him in a fashion that was reminiscent of his mother, when she did not think he understood something. It was an expression that irked him. He did not lack sense or intelligence. He had both in great quantities. This was the trouble with the female of the species. They were always supposing that they knew better than him. His sister could be just as trying. "I am sorry to delay your journey, but James is only just recovered from a broken arm, and I dare not allow him to carry that trunk a moment longer than is necessary. If it were not for that, I would not have bothered you at all." Well, that did change things a bit. "May I be of service?" he offered. "Oh no, I would not dream of asking you to do what I know James and Patrick are capable of doing. It really would not be the thing to ask a complete stranger to carry my sister's wardrobe into my home. Now would it? Why, what would the neighbours think?" Her laugh which followed the question was light and filled with mirth of the purest kind. "I have only just arrived. It really would not do to ruin my reputation before I've even removed my hat." Again she laughed at her own statements. It was an infectious sort of levity that exuded from her and caused Gregory to smile. "Is there a gentleman of the house?" "No, it is just my sister and me." "Indeed?" "Yes," she replied with a flutter of lashes. She did not look to be the spinster sort. Spinsters were rarely as pretty or youthful-looking as the lady before him. "You're not married?" he asked. She shook her head. "And your father has not accompanied you?" "My father is no longer with us, and I have no brother and could not be prevailed upon for all the world to entrust my life and that of my sister to my uncle." She shuddered. "He is not a horrible person, mind you, but I do know that he would not be in favour of spending a season in Bath or anywhere else other than his home. and that would not do for giving Cecily a chance to make a match if she so desires. Cecily is my youngest sister, and that," she pointed to the trunk that was just disappearing inside the townhouse, "is her wardrobe. Pardon me, sir." A maid whom Gregory recognised full well, since she was from his household, slipped around his side. "I am to give this to you as quickly as can be, ma'am," she said with a curtsy for the new neighbour, and as she extended an envelope. Mother. Gregory turned to look back towards home. There, just as he expected, was his mother peering out the front drawing-room window, the one that bowed out from the front of the house. "I am to wait for a reply," his mother's maid was saying as he turned back around. His new neighbour was already reading the missive she had been given. "Oh, that is a very kind thing. Of course, we would be delighted to join Mrs. Stannard for dinner." "How many of you are there?" the maid asked. "Just two. Me, I am Miss Martin, and my sister, Cecily." The maid bobbed another curtsy as she muttered her thanks. Then she turned to Gregory. He shook his head. "Am I also expected for dinner?" he asked before the maid could say a word. "Yes, sir. May I tell your mother that you will be there?" "Do I have a choice?" The maid pressed her lips together to keep from smiling and lightly giggling. Anyone who knew his mother at all knew the answer was no. One might decide to ignore a request from the woman, but one would then also have to expect to be tormented for one's decision for as long as it took for his mother to feel her offence had been discharged appropriately. "May I tell her you will be there, sir?" "I dare say that you can." After another curtsy she was off, scampering her way back to his mother with her news. "Mr. Stannard, is it?" Miss Martin's eyes were dancing with delight. Gregory bowed. "At your service, Miss Martin. My mother prides herself on being the first to greet a new acquaintance, and her forte is planning dinner parties." She most certainly was quick with her invitation. Miss Martin looked up and down the street. "Do you suppose if I stand here long enough, I will get a week's worth of invitations?" She was teasing. He could hear it in her voice. "They would likely all be from my mother, since I believe she is the only matron of a certain age with a son who has just turned 40 and refuses to marry any of the ladies she arranges for him to meet." "Well," Miss Martin replied in surprise, "that seems a rather direct and informative answer. I've only said it thus as I wish for you to be aware that my mother is a scheming woman at times, especially when it comes to me and my marital state." How many uncomfortable meals had he endured due to that scheming? He had lost count. "Am I to suppose, then, that you're set on not marrying at all?" "That has been my plan." "Then I wish you success in it, for I do not believe that one should marry just to be married." "You do not?" That seemed unusual. All of the young ladies he had ever met had been quite desirous of being married at all costs. "Not at all," she replied. "Marriage is not simply some business arrangement one enters into lightly, sir. It is a solemn thing, and one which must be founded on both great admiration and respect, among other things, and that is why I have, to this point in my life, had the same plan as you have." She lowered her voice and leaned toward him a bit. "I assure you that I am not a spinster due to a lack of offers." "Indeed?" To Gregory, Miss Martin seemed a singularly unusual woman in the most delightful way. He would wager 2 crowns on the fact that she was not the sort to fawn over a fellow and ramble on about inane topics. That was very refreshing. Perhaps this dinner would be more enjoyable than most. "I know that such an opinion is not a popular one in many circles, but my father is the one who instilled such a belief in me." The right side of Gregory's lips tipped into a smile. "It sounds to me as if you could not have had a wiser father." "Thank you, Mr. Stannard. He was a wise and wonderful man, who made certain that we were granted the privilege of being able to see to the setting up of our own establishment." She glanced at the door to her townhouse, and Gregory's eyes followed hers. There in the doorway was another young lady who was at least half as beautiful as Miss Martin. "Cecily," Miss Martin said by way of explanation. "I do suppose I should return to setting up my establishment, though I must say it was pleasant to meet you, and I look forward to this evening." "As do I," he replied with a bow of his head. "I wish you good progress in setting things in order," he added before they parted ways. "Who was that?" he heard Miss Cecily ask her sister as he walked away. "Oh, just one of our new neighbours. His name is Mr. Stannard, and his mother has invited us to dinner." "Dinner? How lovely!" Miss Cecily cried. Gregory peeked back at the 2 sisters. The eldest was watching him and lifted a hand in a wave. He returned the gesture and then attempted to apply himself to remembering just how lovely his day with nothing to do and no expectations of any kind was going to be. However, the sheen seemed to have been rubbed off the wonderfulness of such a thought, for his mind would rather be occupied with thinking about a pretty spinster with lively eyes and a fascinating outlook on life, who was wearing a pink pelisse that complemented her complexion to perfection, and who was no longer outside her townhouse when he glanced back a second time. And suddenly he found himself delighted to have an obligation which would require him to return home at a specific time, for it meant that in doing so, he would get to meet Miss Martin's sister and learn as much as he could about his lovely and intriguing new neighbour. Thank you for listening to The Danger of New Neighbours. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please help other readers find it by liking this video and sharing it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be notified when I upload another video. The 2023 copyright for Tales from Pemberley and other sweet story vignettes in which The Danger of New Neighbours can be found is held by Leenie Brown, all rights reserved. The narrator for this story has been Christopher, a cloned voice made available by the voice actor through the Elevenlabs library.